The grey-haired attorney stepped through the front gate, just as my son was carrying my last suitcase to the curb. He didn't look at the luggage first. He looked at me. Then he asked a question that silenced every voice in the yard. "Mr. Daniel Carter, why are you standing outside your own home?" For a moment, nobody answered. My son Michael tightened his grip on the suitcase handle. My daughter-in-law stopped recording with her phone. Even the neighbors who had been pretending to water their flowers suddenly froze. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because after 38 years of learning when to speak and when to stay silent, I finally knew the difference. My name is Daniel Carter. I turned 60 years old that morning. And the house behind me represented 41 years of overtime shifts, missed birthdays, aching knees, and every dream my late wife and I had built together one brick at a time. Yet my own son believed he could throw me out with 2 garbage bags and a single sentence. He had looked me straight in the eyes only 15 minutes earlier and said, "Dad, you're too old to live alone. This house makes more sense for us, we've already decided." Already decided. Those 3 words hurt more than being asked to leave. Because they revealed something deeper. I hadn't been invited into the decision. I had simply been informed. But this story does not start here. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Before we go any further, drop your first name and your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if stories about quiet justice and unexpected truths are the reason you're here today. My story began long before anyone argued over a house. It began in the small manufacturing town of Ashbrook in 1966, where my father worked 12-hour shifts repairing freight trains and my mother cleaned rooms at the county hospital. Money wasn't something we talked about. It was something we survived. Our family lived in a 2-bedroom rental with peeling wallpaper and windows that rattled every winter. When I was 10 years old, I asked my father why we never bought a house like the families across the street. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed his rough hand against the kitchen wall. "This wall belongs to someone else," he said quietly. "If they decide we're gone, we're gone." I never forgot that sentence. Other children dreamed about sports cars. I dreamed about owning walls nobody could take away. At 16, I stocked shelves at Miller's Grocery every weekday from 4 in the afternoon until 9 at night. On Saturdays, I washed delivery trucks. By graduation, I had saved nearly $4,800. Not much by today's standards. Everything to a teenager. College wasn't realistic. Instead, I joined Hamilton Industrial Equipment as an apprentice machine operator. Starting wage: $7.80 an hour. It sounded wonderful until taxes, rent, groceries, and helping my parents were deducted. Still, every paycheck meant one step closer to security. 3 years later, I met Rebecca. She laughed with her whole face. Not politely. Not carefully. She laughed like joy had no reason to apologize. She taught 2nd grade. She earned less than I did, yet somehow managed to save more. On our 3rd date, she told me something that shaped the next 40 years. "A house isn't about showing success," she said. "It's about protecting peace." I married her 9 months later. We didn't have much. Our wedding cost just under $3,400. Half the decorations were handmade. The reception was held inside the church basement. Nobody cared. We were surrounded by people who genuinely wanted us to succeed. Our first apartment measured only 640 square feet. When both of us stretched our arms in the kitchen, we almost bumped elbows. Still, every Sunday evening we'd sit on the floor with homemade coffee and look through real estate magazines. Not because we could afford anything inside. Because hope costs nothing. By 1991, we had saved $46,000. Enough for a respectable down payment. The house wasn't glamorous. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a cracked driveway, an agging maple tree leaning over the backyard. But Rebecca squeezed my hand during the viewing and whispered, "This one already feels like home." The purchase price was $184,000. The mortgage stretched 30 years. The monthly payment scared us. But we signed anyway. I remember carrying our first cardboard box through the front door. There wasn't much inside. A coffee maker, 3 frying pans, a radio, 2 blankets. Yet I had never felt richer. Over the years we transformed every room ourselves. I installed hardwood flooring one summer vacation. Rebecca painted every bedroom. We planted 18 rose bushes. Built a wooden deck. Added bookshelves. Replaced every old window one paycheck at a time. That house wasn't purchased once. It was earned thousands of times. Every nail. Every repair. Every sacrifice. Then Michael was born. Holding him for the first time felt like holding every future I'd ever imagined. Rebecca cried. I cried. The nurse pretended not to notice. I promised my son something before he could even open his eyes properly. You'll never know what it's like wondering whether someone can take your home away. Funny how life remembers promises, even when people forget them. Michael had a happy childhood. Family vacations weren't luxurious. Camping twice every summer. Fishing trips. Friday pizza nights. Birthday traditions where Rebecca baked every cake herself. He never lacked love. But somewhere along the road, comfort quietly became expectation. When children grow up seeing stability, they often mistake it for something that simply exists. They don't always recognize the decades that built it. Rebecca understood that risk long before I did. One evening when Michael was 14, she watched him leave dirty dishes on the table after dinner. I worry, she admitted. About what? That he'll think this life happened naturally. I laughed. He's a teenager. No, she answered. I'm talking about gratitude. At the time, I dismissed the concern. Parents often assume maturity arrives automatically with age. Sometimes it doesn't. Years passed. Michael graduated from college. Started working in marketing. Married Emily. Bought expensive furniture before paying off debt. Leased luxury vehicles every 3 years. Posted smiling vacation photos online. Their lives looked perfect. But appearances are expensive. And eventually, the bills arrive. One winter evening, he visited alone. He seemed unusually quiet. Dad, yes, can I ask you something? Of course. If you and Mom ever, downsized. He hesitated. I've always imagined raising my kids here. Rebecca and I exchanged a glance. She smiled kindly. We're not planning on leaving. Michael nodded. Right, of course. The conversation ended. Or so I believed. Rebecca noticed something I missed. He wasn't asking, she told me after he left. He was measuring time. I wish she had been wrong. Continue. Rebecca's health began changing so gradually that neither of us wanted to admit what we were seeing. It started with forgotten appointments. Then repeated questions. Then the afternoon she stood in our own kitchen, holding the sugar bowl, and quietly asked me where we kept the coffee. She laughed after I answered. I laughed too. But later that night, after she had gone to bed, I sat alone on the back deck until nearly midnight. I wasn't afraid of growing old. I was afraid of growing old without her. The diagnosis came 6 months later. Early-stage dementia. The neurologist spoke gently, carefully choosing words that sounded hopeful without making promises. Rebecca squeezed my hand the entire appointment. When we reached the parking lot, she smiled at me. So, I guess we'll have to make the good days count twice. That was Rebecca. She never fought reality. She simply decided how she wanted to face it. For the next 5 years, our life slowed down. We cancelled long trips. I retired from Hamilton Industrial Equipment after 38 years, 7 months and 11 days. My retirement plaque still hangs in the garage. Not because I care about awards. Because every scratch on my hands earned it. Instead of travelling like we'd planned, I became Rebecca's full-time caregiver. I learned how to organise medications. How to prepare meals she would actually eat. How to calm her when familiar rooms suddenly felt unfamiliar. Some days she remembered everything. Other days she looked at our wedding picture and asked, "She seems happy, was she your wife?" Every time, I answered as though it were the first. Yes, and I loved her very much. She would smile. "I hope she loved you too." And I always nodded. "I think she did." Michael and Emily visited occasionally. At first it was every weekend. Then twice a month. Then birthdays. Then whenever their schedules allowed. I never complained. Young families are busy. Children need attention. Jobs demand time. Life moves quickly. Still, there is a difference between being busy and slowly disappearing from someone's life. Rebecca noticed it before I did. One afternoon, she sat by the living room window watching cars pass. When was the last time Michael stayed longer than an hour? I searched my memory. I couldn't answer. She simply nodded. I thought so. About a year before Rebecca passed away, she asked me to bring a small blue folder from our bedroom closet. Inside were insurance papers, our wills, investment statements, and one sealed envelope with my name written in her careful handwriting. "I want you to promise me something." "I promise." "You haven't heard it yet." "I'll probably promise anyway." She smiled. "That's exactly why I'm asking." She became serious. "If I'm gone before you, don't let loneliness make decisions for you." "I won't. And don't ever let anyone convince you that your life belongs to them just because they're family." Those words landed strangely at the time. I thought she was talking about grief. Now I know she was talking about something much bigger. Rebecca passed away on a quiet Thursday morning in early October. No dramatic final speech. No movie scene. She simply held my hand, looked toward the bedroom window where the morning sunlight was coming through the curtains, and whispered, "What a beautiful day." Then she was gone. After 40 years together. Silence became another person living inside the house. I still set out 2 coffee mugs for nearly 3 weeks before catching myself. I still reached across the bed at night. Sometimes I even started telling her about my day, before remembering there was no one sitting beside me. People say time heals. That's only partly true. Time teaches. Healing is something you choose every morning. Michael became more attentive after the funeral. He called every few days. He stopped by with groceries. Emily brought homemade casseroles. My 2 grandchildren filled the empty rooms with laughter. For a while, I honestly believed we had grown closer. Then the conversations slowly changed. "Dad, this yard is getting too much for one person." "Dad, these stairs aren't safe." "Dad, have you thought about assisted living?" "Dad, houses this size are wasted on one person." Each sentence sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they formed a pattern. One Saturday afternoon, Emily stood in the kitchen looking around. "This neighborhood has become incredibly valuable." "It has," I agreed. "Houses here are selling for over 800,000 now." I nodded. Rebecca and I had bought ours for 184,000. The difference wasn't luck. It was 40 years. Emily smiled. "You've done really well." Something about the way she emphasized "you've done really well" felt less like admiration, and more like calculation. I pushed the thought away. Distrust is a heavy thing to carry. I didn't want to carry it. A few weeks later, Michael asked if they could stay with me temporarily. Just 6 months. Our lease is ending before the new house is ready. It sounded reasonable. Family helps family. So I said yes. 6 months became 8. Then 10. Eventually, half the closets belonged to them. Then the garage. Then the basement. The children's toys filled the living room. Emily redecorated the dining room to make it brighter. Michael replaced my old recliner without asking. Dad, this new one has better back support. He meant well. At least, I wanted to believe he did. But little by little, I noticed something unsettling. Guests began asking if I was living with Michael, instead of asking if Michael was living with me. The house had not changed ownership. Only perception. And perception has a strange way of becoming reality if nobody corrects it. One evening I came home after visiting Rebecca's grave. My favorite reading chair was gone. In storage, Emily explained. It made the room feel cramped. I looked toward the empty corner where Rebecca used to sit knitting every evening. I didn't argue. I simply walked upstairs. That night, for the first time in my own home, I felt like I was borrowing space. The following month, Michael began handling household bills. I can organize everything online. It'll make life easier. Again, reasonable. Very reasonable. Too reasonable. Looking back now, I realize almost every step happened under the disguise of convenience. Nobody demanded control overnight. They collected tiny pieces of it. One decision at a time. One room at a time. One responsibility at a time. Until one morning I woke up. And everyone else seemed to believe the house already belonged to them. I should have recognized the warning signs. Rebecca probably would have. But grief clouds judgment. Loneliness makes company feel valuable, even when it slowly costs you your place in the world. I didn't understand how far things had gone. Until the morning of my 60th birthday. That was the day my son smiled, handed me a cup of coffee, and changed my life with a single sentence. I remember that morning with uncomfortable clarity. Not because it was extraordinary. Because it began so ordinarily. I woke up just after 6. The same way I had for nearly 4 decades. Even in retirement, my body still believed there was a factory whistle waiting somewhere in the distance. The house was quiet. I shaved. Put on the navy blue sweater Rebecca had given me on my 55th birthday. The elbows were beginning to wear thin, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. Some things aren't clothing anymore. They're memories. When I walked downstairs, the kitchen was already busy. Emily was making pancakes. The grandchildren were decorating the dining room with paper streamers. Michael looked up and smiled. Happy birthday, Dad. He hugged me. It felt genuine. At least I thought it did. For a little while, I allowed myself to believe this would simply be a family celebration. The grandchildren handed me handmade birthday cards. One had drawn a crooked picture of our house with an enormous maple tree and 4 smiling stick figures. Underneath, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Grandpa's home." I smiled so hard my eyes watered. Children often tell the truth without realizing it. If only adults could do the same. After breakfast, Emily cleared the dishes unusually quickly. Michael glanced toward her. She nodded. It was the kind of silent communication that only people with a prepared plan share. Dad, Michael said, can we sit down for a minute? Of course. He folded his hands together. Emily sat beside him. Neither of them looked angry. Neither looked nervous. They looked decided. Michael spoke first. We've been talking about your future. I laughed softly. My future. You're 60 now. I noticed. He didn't smile. You've been alone since Mom passed. I have. The stairs are getting dangerous. They haven't hurt me yet. Emily leaned forward. This isn't about today, it's about the next 10 or 20 years. Again, a reasonable sentence. Reasonable words can hide unreasonable intentions. Michael took a deep breath. We think it's time for you to move into a retirement community. I stared at him. I think I'll stay here. Dad, I appreciate your concern. I'm not asking. The room became very quiet. He continued, We've already spoken with a retirement residence 20 minutes away. I blinked. You what? They have an opening. I didn't apply. We filled out the paperwork. You what? It was easier this way. Every answer created 2 new questions. I looked at Emily. You knew about this. She nodded. We're doing this because we care. Care. It's amazing how often painful decisions borrow kind words. I placed my coffee cup on the table. I'm not moving. Michael sighed the way parents sometimes sigh at stubborn children. Dad, listen to yourself. I am. No, you're reacting emotionally. This is my house. His eyes shifted. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. It isn't really your house anymore. I felt the air leave my lungs. What does that mean? We've been paying utilities. For 8 months. We've maintained the property. I maintained it for 40 years. He ignored that. The kids need stability. So did I. This house makes more sense for our family. Our family. You know what I mean. No, Michael's. I looked directly into his eyes. I honestly don't. And he stood. Dad. His voice had become firmer. We've decided you're moving today. Today. Not next month. Not after discussion. Today. I waited for someone to laugh. To admit this was some horrible misunderstanding. Nobody did. Emily quietly walked toward the hallway. When she returned, she was carrying 2 large black suitcases. My suitcases. Already packed. I looked at them. Then back at my son. You packed my clothes. We only packed what you'll need. What I'll need. The retirement residence is furnished. The room began to feel unfamiliar. Not because the walls had changed. Because the people inside them had. I walked upstairs without saying a word. Every drawer had already been opened. Half my closet was empty. Rebecca's photo album was sitting on the bed beside one suitcase. Who chooses another person's memories for them? Who decides which parts of someone's life fit into 2 bags? I picked up the photo album and placed it carefully inside. Then I opened the bedside drawer. The blue folder Rebecca had given me. It was still there. Untouched. I rested my hand on it for several seconds. Then I smiled. A very small smile. Not because I was planning revenge. Because I suddenly understood something they didn't. They believed ownership came from occupying a house. They had no idea ownership had been settled years earlier. I quietly closed the drawer again. There was no reason to take the folder. Not yet. When I came downstairs carrying the 2 suitcases, Michael looked relieved. I knew you'd understand. No, I answered calmly. I understand something. But not what you think. He seemed confused. I don't want this to become ugly. It won't. Emily crossed her arms. So you're accepting this? I looked around the living room. The new furniture. The children's toys. Rebecca's missing reading chair. The walls we had painted together. The staircase I had refinished by hand. 41 years. reduced to a conversation that had lasted less than 15 minutes. I won't argue. Michael exhaled in relief. I knew you'd do the right thing. The right thing. Funny how people often define right as whatever benefits them most. He picked up one suitcase. I picked up the other. We walked toward the front door together. The grandchildren stood silently near the staircase. The older one whispered, "Grandpa, where are you going?" Before I could answer, Emily spoke. "Grandpa's moving somewhere safer." The little girl frowned. "But this is Grandpa's house." Nobody answered her. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room asks the biggest question. Michael carried my suitcase onto the front porch. Then the second. He turned back toward me. "I'll help you call the retirement place after lunch." "I won't need your help." He assumed I meant I could make the call myself. He had no idea what I actually meant. I stepped onto the front walkway. The morning sun was warm. The maple tree Rebecca had planted nearly 30 years earlier moved gently in the breeze. I looked at the house one last time. Not with anger. With gratitude. Because unlike the people inside, the house had never betrayed me. Then, just as Michael pulled the front door closed behind me, a black sedan stopped at the curb, and a grey-haired man in a tailored navy suit stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. He looked from the house to me, then asked in a puzzled voice, "Mr. Carter, why are you standing outside your own home?" The front yard fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop. Michael frowned as he walked down the porch steps. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "Can I help you?" The older man extended his hand. "My name is Richard Bennett." Michael shook it. "I'm Daniel's son." "I know." Mr. Bennett's answer was calm. "I've represented Mr. Carter's legal affairs for nearly 12 years. I noticed Michael's expression change. Just slightly. The confidence that had filled his face a moment earlier gave way to curiosity. "I'm actually here because Mr. Carter asked me to stop by at 10 o'clock this morning." Michael looked at me. "You called a lawyer." "I made the appointment 3 weeks ago." "You never mentioned it." "You never asked." Mr. Bennett opened his briefcase. "I apologize if my timing is inconvenient." "It is," Michael replied. "We're in the middle of a family matter." Mr. Bennett smiled politely. "I'm afraid this matter concerns exactly why I'm here." Emily stepped onto the porch. "What is this about?" Instead of answering immediately, Mr. Bennett turned toward me. "Mr. Carter, before we continue, I need to confirm one thing." "Go ahead." "Has anyone forced you to leave your residence against your wishes today?" Michael interrupted before I could answer. "No one's forcing anyone." I kept my eyes on Mr. Bennett. "Yes. One word. Nothing more." The attorney slowly closed his briefcase. Not angrily. Carefully. As though every movement mattered. "Thank you." Michael folded his arms. "Dad, this is unnecessary." "No," Mr. Bennett replied before I could speak. "It has become very necessary." By now, 2 neighbors had wandered closer. Another stood across the street, pretending to check his mailbox. Nobody said a word. People rarely interrupt moments they know they'll remember. Mr. Bennett reached into his briefcase again and removed a thick folder. Cream-colored paper. Blue tabs. Official seals. He handed the first document to me. "I believe this belongs to you." I recognized it immediately. The original property trust agreement. Rebecca and I had signed it 7 years earlier. After one of our closest friends lost his home in a bitter inheritance dispute, we spent months meeting with attorneys and financial planners. Rebecca had insisted. "Daniel," she told me, "people don't change overnight. Circumstances reveal parts of them that were always there." At the time, I thought she was simply being cautious. She was being wise. Michael looked confused. What is that? I answered quietly. The reason I wasn't worried. Mr. Bennet continued. Several years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Carter transferred this property into an irrevocable family preservation trust. Emily blinked. A what? A legal structure designed to protect the property according to very specific instructions. Michael laughed nervously. Okay, but I'm his son. Yes. And eventually the house becomes mine. Mr. Bennet looked directly at him. Only if the conditions established by the trust are fulfilled. Silence. What conditions? Michael asked. The attorney opened another page. The surviving spouse maintains the unrestricted lifetime right to occupy, control, or sell the property. Michael's smile disappeared. And after that, Mr. Bennet didn't rush. Upon the surviving spouse's passing, ownership transfers only if the trustee determines that all obligations outlined by the trust have been honored. Emily frowned. What obligations? Mr. Bennet read directly from the document. The beneficiary shall demonstrate consistent care, respect, and voluntary support toward the surviving parent without coercion, financial manipulation, or attempts to remove lawful occupancy. Nobody spoke. The words seemed to hang in the air. Michael stared at me. Dad. I remained quiet. He turned back toward the attorney. So what happens if someone doesn't meet those requirements? Mr. Bennet calmly turned another page. The trust provides an alternate distribution. Emily's face lost its color. What alternate distribution? The property is to be sold. And the proceeds distributed among 5 educational scholarship funds established in Mr. and Mrs. Carter's names, along with several local community charities. Michael actually laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh. No. Mr. Bennet looked at him kindly. Yes. That's impossible. It was signed, witnessed, notarized, and recorded years ago. Michael looked at me as though he no longer recognized the man standing in front of him. You never told me. I finally answered. You never asked what your mother and I wanted. You hid this. No. I protected it. Emily stepped forward. There has to be some mistake. There isn't, Mr. Bennet replied. The trust was specifically designed to prevent exactly this type of situation. Michael's voice became louder. So because we're trying to help him. I interrupted for the first time. Help. He stopped talking. I continued quietly. You packed my clothes. You were going to be safer. You decided where I would live. We were thinking long term. You locked the door behind me. For the first time that morning. He had no answer. The grandchildren had quietly walked onto the porch. The older one looked at his father. Dad. No one responded. The child looked at me instead. Grandpa, are you coming back inside? I smiled gently. Yes. Before anyone else could speak, Mr. Bennet added one final sentence. And for the record. Everyone looked at him. Mr. Carter has not lost his home today. He paused. He has simply discovered who believed it was already theirs. No one argued. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need a raised voice. It only needs the right document. No one moved. The front door remained half open. The birthday decorations were still hanging inside the dining room. The balloons drifted gently in the air conditioning. It looked like a celebration. It no longer felt like one. Michael stared at the trust documents as though reading them a second time might change the words. Finally, he looked at me. Dad, why didn't you tell us? I answered honestly. Because your mother and I never wanted our family to behave well for the sake of an inheritance. His shoulders dropped. We weren't after your money. I hope that's true. It is. Then the house shouldn't matter. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Sometimes people discover their own contradictions before anyone else points them out. Emily stepped forward. We've taken care of this place. You have, I said. And I'm grateful for every lawn you mowed and every bill you paid. She looked relieved. Then I continued. But gratitude doesn't erase entitlement. Her eyes lowered to the ground. I never meant for it to become like this. I believe you. And I did. Emily wasn't cruel. She was practical. She believed families should organize resources efficiently. A large house, young children, an aging widower. To her, the solution had looked obvious. What she never understood was that a home isn't a spreadsheet. Its value isn't measured only by square footage or market price. It's measured by memory. The neighbors quietly drifted away. There was nothing left to watch. No shouting. No police. No dramatic confrontation. Only a family standing in uncomfortable silence. Mr. Bennet checked his watch. I'll leave you all some privacy. He handed me his card. If you need anything, call me. I will. After he drove away, Michael spoke again. His voice sounded smaller. So, what happens now? I looked at the birthday banner hanging above the dining room window. Happy 60th birthday. Rebecca would have laughed at the irony. My birthday continues. He frowned. What? I was planning to grill hamburgers. Dad, the grandchildren are expecting cake. He stared at me. You still want us here? I thought carefully before answering. I want my grandchildren here. No one misunderstood what I meant. Lunch happened in near silence. The children slowly relaxed. Children are remarkably resilient when adults stop making them choose sides. The adults, however, barely touched their food. Michael kept glancing toward me as though waiting for a lecture. It never came. Emily apologized twice for the packed suitcases. I accepted both apologies. Then we ate. That evening, after the grandchildren had gone to bed, Michael knocked softly on my bedroom door. Can we talk? I nodded. He sat in the chair beside the window. The same chair where Rebecca had once read novels every evening. I've been thinking all afternoon. I know. I became the kind of man I used to criticize. I remained quiet. He continued. I kept telling myself I was being responsible. Were you? Partly. And the other part. He looked out the window. I got comfortable. He swallowed. Then I started acting like comfort was ownership. I appreciated the honesty. Not because it erased what had happened. Because genuine accountability begins with accurate language. I'm sorry, Dad. I know. No. He looked directly at me. I don't think you understand. I probably don't. I'm not apologizing because of the trust. He paused. I'm apologizing because if there hadn't been a trust. His voice broke. I would have gone through with it. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. That sentence hurt more than everything else combined. Because it was true. Not legal truth. Human truth. I finally asked. Do you know what disappointed me the most today? The house. No, the fact that you never once asked what I wanted. He covered his face with both hands. I didn't. You planned my future. I did. You packed my memories. I did. You spoke about my life as though I had already left it. Tears quietly rolled down his face. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as my father. I answered softly. You never stopped seeing me as your father. He looked confused. You stopped seeing me as a person. That sentence stayed between us long after the conversation ended. The following morning, Michael and Emily packed every box they had brought into the house. Not because I demanded it. Because they understood they couldn't begin repairing trust while continuing to occupy space they had claimed without permission. The grandchildren hugged me tightly before leaving. The older one whispered, "Can I still come over every Saturday?" I smiled. "Every Saturday." He grinned. "Even if Dad has to ring the doorbell." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Especially then. When their car disappeared down the street, the house became quiet again. But this silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was honest. Over the next several months, I put the house back together. Not quickly. Room by rooms. I found Rebecca's reading chair in a storage unit. I brought it home. I placed it exactly where it had always been. I replanted the rose bushes that had died. I refinished the front porch. I painted the guest bedroom. Not because it needed paint. Because creating something with my hands reminded me who I had always been. One afternoon, I received a letter from Hamilton Industrial Equipment. They were namming their apprentice scholarship after employees who had completed more than 35 years of service. Rebecca and I had quietly donated to the program for years. Now they wanted to name the first annual award after us. I attended the ceremony wearing the same navy blue sweater Rebecca had given me. The elbows were still worn. I left them that way. Some signs of use are marks of honor. When I stood before a room full of young apprentices, one of them asked, "Mr. Carter, what's the most important thing you learned in 38 years?" I thought about the factory, about Rebecca, about my son, about the front yard, about the trust. Then I answered, "Never confuse building something with owning the person who built it." The room became very quiet. A few weeks later, Michael asked if we could have breakfast together. Just the two of us. We met at the small diner where Rebecca and I used to stop every anniversary. He looked nervous. "I've started seeing a counselor." I nodded. "I think that's wise." I wanted to understand why I became so controlling. And he smiled sadly. "I spent so much time trying to create security for my family that I forgot you were someone else's family first." He meant Rebecca. I knew it. For the first time since her passing. Mentioning her name didn't fill the space with pain. It filled it with gratitude. We never became the family we had been before. Some things, once broken, don't return to their original shape. But they can become strong in new ways. Today, my grandchildren still spend Saturdays at my house. Michael always rings the bell. Even though I tell him he can simply walk in. He smiles every time. I know. Then he waits. Not because he has to. Because he finally understands that respect often sounds exactly like a doorbell. Looking back now, I realize this story was never really about a house. The house was only the stage. The real story was about a system that quietly teaches older people that their value decreases as their usefulness changes. It teaches children that inheritance is inevitable. It teaches families to mistake convenience for compassion. That system is powerful. But it isn't unstoppable. Sometimes all it takes to break it is one person who quietly says, "No, not with anger. Not with revenge. Just with dignity." The property was never truly my son's to take. But something far more important was always mine to protect. My self-respect. If you've stayed with me until the end, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone tried to decide your future without asking you first? Thank you for spending this time with me. Subscribe to Revenge Cold Stories and I'll see you in the next one.